the beer is actually made on site right behind us in this nano brewery here at Friendship Village. And I just want to thank Friendship Village for welcoming us, KJZZ, to have this evening with you guys. And of course, I want to thank the staff at KJZZ. Many of them have been behind, they're right behind you, and they've been spending a lot of time setting up this event for us. And of course, just want to give a shout out to my editors, Lindsay over there, who helped spearhead this project about Generation X, the forgotten generation. We had been talking about this series for quite a long time, and as members of Generation X, well, we didn't want to be forgotten anymore. So here we are. A couple housekeeping things. As I mentioned, there's food and drink. The restrooms are located if you go out by the elevators and you kind of veer left, you'll find the restrooms are right by the drinking fountains. And with that, I just want to introduce our panel, and I've got my little worksheet here so I can give everyone a proper introduction. Hey, Leah, I'm nothing but prepared.
That's perfect. Wonderful.
First, I want to introduce Jacob Gold. Jacob Gold, he is an accomplished certified financial planner, author of 2 books, and adjunct professor of finance at the W.P. Carey School of Business at ASU. And you might have heard his story on KJZZ a couple of weeks ago where he was talking about financial planning and how to save. Leanne Dolan is the managing director of Valley Youth Theater. And Dolan, this is my reporter face.
No, I get it.
Yeah. Leanne recently took the helm of VYT's longtime executive producer, Bob Cooper, and I interviewed Leanne about a story about how she's building resilience among the next generation of, I guess Generation Alpha, right? And
I think that, yeah. Z and Alpha.
Z and Alpha, Z and Alpha. And Frank Inferna is a professor in the Department of Psychology at ASU, and he's doing some really interesting work, which he's going to talk about midlife and chronicling the ups and downs of middle-aged adults, which I'm really excited for all of you to hear more about, because when I interviewed Frank, I've interviewed him a couple of times, and I was stunned. I was really stunned. But I want to start with Jacob, because the big question that I think a lot of people have, myself included, all of us on the panel, the elephant in the room, the state of the markets. How do we wade through all of this noise? Because it's overwhelming, it's scary. Many of us are either late Gen Xers who are approaching 60 and getting close to that sweet spot, or we maybe only have like 15 more years where we hope to be working. So how do we cut through the noise?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because really no one fully knows what's going to transpire over the next several years. There's a lot of dust in the air. It can go many different ways. I think what's most important for people to know is try not to time the market, but find a way to diversify so you can have time in the market. You don't want to have highly concentrated positions in one sector over another. You need to have a little bit everywhere. And I would say as well is make sure you have plenty of liquidity. If you have enough liquidity for the next, let's say 6 months, 12 months, then you can emotionally separate yourself from your investments and allow them to go with the tide, all while knowing you have adequate liquidity. But if you don't have adequate liquidity and something happens in your household, car breaks down, you need a new AC unit, and you have to sell something at a loss to be able to pay for that, that's going to feel extra painful for you. So I think that what we have to realize is that going forward, it's going to be at a snail's pace. And we'll take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but try not to time the market, try not to be emotional. And of course, too, if you're just starting to invest and you have a lot of consumer debt, AKA credit cards or even auto loans, and if you're paying 5%, 6%, 7% in interest, I think it might be difficult for one to say, okay, over the next 6 months, 12 months, 3 years, I'm very confident that my investments will do better than that. So it could be an easy layup for you of saying, okay, instead of putting myself in a position where I could possibly lose money in the short term, maybe I take those dollars, pay down some debt, and a penny saved is a penny earned. And I think that that's really important to have perspective. And if you do get emotional by looking at the headlines, as long as you're well diversified, as long as you have enough liquidity, maybe don't look at the news as often. Maybe don't look at the markets as often because it's a trigger. But if you know you're diversified, you've got liquidity, and you do feel in some shape or form this democracy will move forward, then I feel that long-term we should have skin in the game, but in a diversified long-term perspective.
Thank you, Jacob. You mentioned the word emotional, don't get emotional. I want to reach out to Frank because that is what your work is about, in a sense. You've been studying middle-aged Americans and actually middle-aged people around the world.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about what are you finding?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's not too good. I mean, it's depressing, and my wife tells me I should study things that are more positive, but I mean, the data tell us what it shows us. I mean, so I use these longitudinal panel surveys, so they assess tens of thousands of people every 2 years. So there's data that we use from the US, Europe, and Asia, as well as Mexico, and we're able to track how people's feelings of loneliness, depressive symptoms, health, and memory are changing over time and across cohorts or between cohorts. So one data set from the US, we have data from all the way from 1992 to until 2022. We're able to compare, okay, how is it that, Gen Xers are doing, the silent generation and baby boomers, and not so good. So, people born in the late 60s, early 70s are reporting elevations in loneliness, more depressive symptoms, and poor overall health. And it's pretty specific to the US. So that's also the nice thing about using these large surveys from across the world. We can kind of compare and contrast how is it that, people in the US are doing in relation to other nations, and not good. But I'm starting to think of ways to be more positive and think about interventions
come up with solutions
and
as well.
potential solutions, but we can stick with the negative to start. But I know,
That's how we like to open things up.
Yeah.
Actually, I think Leanne's going to bring us to the positive side of things, because Leanne's work with Valley Youth Theater, you work with a wide range of generations, from perhaps baby boomers who might be on the board to the youngest of the youngest, Generation Alpha, who could be, and I think they were born between 2010 and 2024.
Like right now we're opening Annie, and I think the youngest person in the cast is 8. So right now, the show that we're in, we have 8-year-olds, 2 18-year-olds, all in the same space, all in the same show, all sharing the same place. And we always tell the 18-year-olds, like, give the 8-year-olds the 10 years to know all the stuff that you shouldn't know when you're 18. Like, don't be talking about all of that stuff in front of the 8-year-olds. It's really interesting dealing with all the different generations, because I was a Valley Youth Theater kid myself. So I was in one of their very first shows that they did in 1990. And Valley Youth Theater itself is an organization. It's a nonprofit. We are overseen by a board, but I run the organization. And the premise of the organization has stayed the same the entire time, which is inspiring children and using the performing arts in order to do so. And that's something that is actually kind of stayed the same over each generation, using the performing arts in order to inspire. So it's not something that's definitely unique to each generation. It's something that I found when I was a 16-year-old kid, but it's something that 18-year-olds and 16-year-olds and 8-year-olds are finding today.
How are you navigating the different generations? Because I mean, every generation has a different style. We all know when we work with different cohorts. What tips do you have, or what are the challenges, and how do you what's the trick?
Yeah, well, I think it's actually really funny, because when I take a look at who I am as a person and Generation X, and agreed, I think we can all agree, like, there's no generation that's a monolith, right? Like, we all are individual and unique. But Generation X has always been this bridge between the boomers, who, like, never used a computer and everything was in pencil, chiseled on a tablet, and, like, the kids who, like, everything is on the cell phone. And we're, like, the bridge that has always bridged those two generations together. Yeah. So, so the things like, it was funny, because I was listening to you. My dad started at the same company he retired from at 80, and that is not an experience that any
None of us.
kid these days is going to have. And very few Gen Xers have. Maybe we went into it thinking we were going to do that, but that is not our experience at all. So I kind of always see our generation as being that bridge between this like old world view of like hard work pays off, you work hard, you get rewarded, you stay at the same job and you get rewarded, and this like new way of doing something where nothing is permanent, nothing exists. I'm gonna go work at Bali, and we're just kind of like the bridge between the two to kind of like bring them together.
I think that's a really good point because to your point, we can live in two worlds.
Mhm.
We can use a typewriter and we can also use a computer.
Mhm.
And I actually have a typewriter in my house, and my daughter, like it's an antique
Right.
for her. So
It's fascinating.
it's fascinating for her. Jacob, I want to talk about, this was another big question that we had from members of the audience, the savings piece of it. So if you are behind the 8 ball, well, I guess my one question is, can you share like is there a magic number that we should all have by the time we're 65? And if we're not there, how do we play catch up?
Yeah, so there is no magic number. Everybody here has a different lifestyle. One person might spend $2,000 a month. Another person might be spending $15,000 a month. So it's all relative to the lifestyle that you want to maintain in retirement. I think it also is worth mentioning too that if someone has a pension, whether they're a state employee, a federal employee, or working for a company that offers a pension, that person that has a pension, they may not need as much put aside as someone that doesn't have a pension because they'll be receiving income from that pension. So retirement and financial independence is completely individualized. With that being said, though, I think a lot of people feel that they are behind the 8 ball, whether it's macroeconomics or maybe they had personal things that they were working on and time just got away from them. Let's be real. There's never a convenient time to invest, right? The markets are up. People say, why would I want to buy right now? Now it's at an all-time high and it might decline. If the markets are down, people are saying, why would I buy right now when the markets are down? This is the one industry when things are on sale, nobody wants to buy. And that's okay. I mean, that's good for long-term investors because you can get opportunities. But I think that for someone that feels that they're behind the 8 ball, the solution isn't really one that you want to hear. What the solution is either you're going to have to work longer so your money has more time to compound. You're going to have to save more than what you're currently saving, and you might have to live on less. So those are 3 things that you have to adjust. And a lot of times when I sit down with people and we ask, how much do you need per month to live on to feel comfortable? And once again, everyone's situation is different. But once we have that number, we can reverse engineer it and we can then figure out based on what you need right now, adjusted for inflation, taking into account your Social Security, taking into account whether you have a pension or not, and all of your other investments, we can figure out how much you would need to have in order to retire. But it is different for everybody, and most people feel that they are behind the 8 ball. The other thing that we have to remember is us Gen Xers, we're going to live longer. So, a lot of times people might say, oh, my father retired at 62 or 65, and I might have to work until I'm 70 or 72. Well, based on modern medicine, you might still have more retirement years than your father because you're living longer. So the one thing we don't want to happen is we don't want you to retire too early and then run out of money before you run out of life, right? Because as we're retired, once that money starts disappearing, you feel very vulnerable. You can't go back into the corporate world and get a job and continue off where you stopped. You have one shot to retire, one shot to make it work. So it's better to have bad news early and know what you need to do to get to where you want to be. And then once you're there, financially you'll be just fine, than to retire without knowing how much is enough and just crossing your fingers and hoping that everything goes well.
I'm curious, Frank, I have a question about Social Security for you that I want to come back to, but I also want to ask Frank, in talking about some of the medical side of things, your research, which this really scared me, besides the loneliness, which is huge. I mean, we know that's an epidemic already, specifically among older adults. Now to hear about middle-aged
Right,
individuals.
yeah.
But there was a cognitive piece that you were seeing as
Right.
well. And I was curious, is that cognitive decline, is that permanent that you're seeing, or is that sort of circumstantial because stress can do
I
that?
mean, thinking on the positive side, yeah, circumstantial. Like,
knew
I
you could be.
think it's, think about the climate that we're living in, politically, just living our lives, how stressful they can be if people are living paycheck to paycheck. That can certainly wear and tear on your mental side of things, but also on your body. So if you're being unhealthy, not working out, or not eating proper foods, then that also kind of feeds into the memory side of things as well. So I think they're all interrelated.
Are
Yeah.
you seeing this in middle-aged individuals who live in other countries?
No, well, that's the other side of things. Yeah, I mean, we're not seeing that in the other nations that we've studied. So it's, again, something, well, we like being unique and exceptional in the US, but obviously for this, it's not in the proper direction. But I think when we think about the other nations, I mean, some of the ideas that we've discussed is, they have more of a social safety net. So if you think of nations like Germany, France, Sweden, and the times that we've discussed before, I'm like, the perfect solution to this is, yeah, let's just become Sweden, but that's impossible because I don't know, we can't do that. But, having, when it comes to work, having access to paid time off, whereas here it's kind of very specific to where your job is and who your employer is. And also when it comes to the financial side of things, health insurance, people are paying a lot for health insurance, but also people who have health insurance, they're underinsured. So paying a lot of high out-of-pocket costs, high deductibles. I mean, that can certainly wear on your finances and also on your cognitive abilities as well.
I'm going to come back to you about building resiliency, and that's another question I have for Leanne on that. But Jacob, I do want to ask you about the Social Security piece of it. Two questions. One, can most of us Gen Xers expect to get our full Social Security? Or should we be worried about only getting a certain amount? I heard some laughter.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a tricky one, right? We do know that at the bottom of your Social Security statement, it does say that Social Security is fully funded till, I think, 2036. If changes don't happen, we could see reductions in that payment. But let me put a pin in that, but then let me back up a little bit. If we take a look at the major voting bloc here in the United States, the largest voting bloc are retirees. If you begin to take away or reduce their Social Security, and they are primarily living just on Social Security, that would be a catastrophic situation and very much a political suicide mission. Because I feel, and I'm somewhat cynical when it comes to politics, but I do feel that all politicians, their biggest focus is to get reelected. And they don't want to do something or say something that could somehow prevent them from getting reelected. Now, with that being said, I do think Social Security will be there. Now, what it will look like is a little bit unknown. There are a lot of things that the government can do to kick the tire down the road. One, they could extend the number of years we are before we can get full retirement. Maybe they take away early retirement at 62. Right now, a spouse, if their Social Security is less than their spouse's, they can choose to take half of their spouse's Social Security instead of their own. That could be modified. We also know that FICA tax is only paid up to a certain dollar amount of your income per year. All of these things could be modified. You could still get your Social Security check, but it might be a little bit different. Maybe it's taxed more. Maybe you have to wait longer. So I do think in some shape or form, Social Security will be around for Gen X. I can't necessarily say that for my kids, but I do feel fairly confident that those individuals that are collecting Social Security, it should be fine. Those that are in the Generation X, like all of us, I do think Social Security will be there, but I do think that there's a high chance that it will be slightly modified for us by the time we get to full retirement age. But I do think it will be there.
That's bumming me out a little bit.
I know, I'm sorry.
I do want to ask, though, 62, which is the earliest you can take Social Security, would it be wise for someone who is behind the 8 ball to perhaps, could you take your Social Security at 62 and continue working and then invest to make up for that?
If you are still working at 62, there is an income cap restriction. So once you get over that limit, for every $2 you make over that limit, you lose $1 of Social Security benefit. So my solution is if you're still working at 62, don't collect Social Security because you might end up giving a lot of it back. Also, if you take it out at 62, you will always get that discounted amount. I think that the greatest opportunity for individuals, if they're financially able to wait, is to wait until age 70 to take Social Security. Because from full retirement age to age 70, your Social Security benefit will compound by 8% per year. But if someone can wait till 70, that means that they have other income, other assets they can live off of. Also, they're expecting to live long based on their longevity. But that is where you could really maximize Social Security, is waiting until age 70.
I want to pivot to resiliency. And this is something that Leanne and I talked a lot about in our interview because, we oftentimes, the joke is, Gen Xers, like we were latchkey kids. I don't know how many of us were left home alone, and we would never dream of leaving our own children home alone.
No.
You are working with a group of young people, and your job is to teach them how to be resilient. These kids get rejection letters sometimes when they don't make a part. I mean, that's
absolutely intense. That's the thing, right, about Gen X. Like, a lot of us didn't have parents at home, and we were hungry, and there's tortilla chips and Kraft American Singles, and we made nachos.
And we're alive. We're still alive.
In the microwave, and that's like, we were hungry, we figured it out. And because we went through that struggle, we kind of think like, hey, we tell our kids, like, I got it. You don't need to struggle. I did the struggling. You're okay. They don't need to figure it out on their own, because we'll figure it out for them, because we've had to figure it out our entire lives. And we're trying to like make up maybe for some past thing that like our parents weren't there to help us figure it out. I'm going to be here all the time for you to help you figure it out, which is great because our children are feeling loved. However, they also have to be told to bring a pencil to school so they can write things down. So what we do at Valley Youth Theater, and one of the reasons why a lot of children come to our program, there's a lot of different theater programs and they're all really great. But what we do here is we treat children as professionals. We tell them, you're going to get your script. That's your script. You're going to bring 3 sharpened pencils. The reason why you need 3 pencils is because one's going to break. The second one you're going to give to your friend who forgot it. And then you're going to use the third one. This is how it works. We want kids to understand, like, you need to be prepared. You need to understand how it works in the real world. I'm not going to brag, but I am going to name drop. Valley Youth Theater, we had a young woman in the 2000s, Emma Stone, you guys, 2-time Academy Award winner. Emma Stone, Valley Youth Theater kid. Thank you very much. But Emma, when she became an actress, she said one of the best things that happened to her was she came to Valley Youth Theater because she learned how to work in the real world. So when she went and got a job at a theater, when she went and got a job on a set, she wasn't like, oh, what do I do? Are you going to get this for me? She was ready to work. She had her lines memorized. She was ready to go. She wasn't expecting anyone to do it for her. She put in her own work and she worked really hard. And she attributed her time at Valley Youth Theater and her time with Bob Cooper to the fact that she knew how to work hard. Kids want to work hard. They really do. They want to have a structure. They want to be told, we're going to do this at this time. We're going to do this at this time. We didn't get that. We were just like, go for it. And we had to figure it out on their own. There is a middle ground between the like, parents are just go for it. and like let me do every single thing for you.
Yeah.
The idea of like it's 10 o'clock, do you know where your kids are, is insane to me. Because like my kids have been in bed since 8:30. Like my 14-year-old is asleep. She's, they're out.
That is mind-boggling that was a commercial. Do you guys
Yeah.
remember that commercial of like, do you know where your child is at 10 p.m.?
At 10 p.m. Oh my gosh, my child has like been asleep for hours. I know exactly where they are.
Frank, I want to talk a little bit about resiliency in middle-aged individuals, because that's part of the work too, is how do you cultivate resiliency in a group of individuals who are struggling. We are struggling with loneliness. We're struggling with, potential cognitive decline because of the intense stress factors. How do you change that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very person specific and individualized in terms of how you go about kind of building your support system or your resilience. And it could be through, I was going over the Surgeon General advisory report on parents under pressure that was released last year. And, in it, he talked about one of the ways is, being okay with just venting your issues when it comes to parenting. If your kids are stressing you out or their school is stressing you out or work is stressing you out, just finding your kind of group, your community, your village who you can just feel like you can openly communicate these sorts of issues with. I mean, I have 2 young kids, and I feel like whenever we have play dates, it's just, the parents are just like, gosh, what are we doing? Like, is parenting supposed to be this stressful? I mean, I always go back, I always, tell my wife, I'm like, was it this stressful for our parents? I don't know. I don't remember them. They were stressed, but, dealing with all the other pressures that we have today. Other ways, I mean, is through physical activity, finding a hobby. I mean, it may seem as simple as that, of kind of what are you into? What are things that you can get into? And, last summer, something I started doing was going indoor rock climbing. And little did I know, I mean, I really enjoy the rock climbing part, but the other side of it I enjoyed just as much, is just interacting with other climbers who are there. Just, we're just very superficial level of just talking about climbing and the routes, but it just builds a sense of community of trying to help one another. And, that could also be done through cycling or other physical activity classes, or just starting from next door or with your neighbors. It could be a walking group, or, even with some friends from work, like a cooking group, or doing like once a month having potlucks. Just, I think it's really depends on what you're into and trying to derive some benefit from it. But openly venting about your stress is always a good option too.
I love the community piece, and I actually want to pivot now. We did get some questions from listeners that were sent to us, and I want to, and this is sort of a free for all, though some were specific, and some you'll realize who they're for. What suggestions do you have for people without children and single with no immediate family around? I'm thinking community straight off the bat. Who wants to start? Leanne, Frank, Jacob?
Sure. Like I'm a big proponent of the arts. Obviously, I have an arts organization. The arts are extremely important, and people always think, well, yeah, being on stage is the thing that the kids get the most out of. Not really. The actual ones that are really affected the most are the kids that have never stepped into a theater before in their entire life, and they step into a theater and they are transported. There are so many great theaters around town, and there are so many great groups within those theaters of people who go and see the show at the same time. And then you can, if you want to, you can discuss it afterwards, or you don't have to. You can just go with someone, go with people, sit with your group, and be like, peace out, thanks. You don't have to talk to people. Like some people aren't theater kids. And you don't have to talk to anyone. So I'm a big proponent of finding, there's also a Phoenix Film Foundation has an amazing movie club where you get to see like new films, and you get to go with people. They have discussions afterwards. You can listen to discussions if you want to or not. So I would say my big thing because I'm not a big drinker, but if I was, I'd be here all the time. But check out some of the arts organizations in towns, ones that interest you. We Valley Youth Theater, by the way, a little plug, like it's just kids on stage. And half the time you would not have realized those were young people on stage. We've had people walk out and we're like, are you sure those are kids? And I'm like, yes, they are kids on stage. So it's an amazing experience. But I say, go see some arts organizations in town.
Thank you. Frank, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, another thing that came to mind just thinking about, maybe a potential cause or reason, right? People are kind of lonely or searching out, more people are working from home and not so much going into the office as well. And it's, when going to the office, you kind of naturally find people to interact with. I mean, for me, growing up, I played sports, I played baseball. So we had our group, our team, and we'd always hang out. But when it comes to adulting,
It's tougher to find your people.
It's finding friends takes effort. It's
does.
very tough. I mean, before coming to ASU, I lived in Berlin, Germany for 2 years. And yeah, the first probably 4 to 6 months were pretty lonely because it took a long time to just find other people to regularly interact with. I mean, for me, I was like dreading the weekends because, Monday through Friday, I'd go to the office, I'd have people to interact with. And then as the weekends, are like, oh, I don't have anything planned. Like, what am I going to do? But over time, kind of found a group and we'd regularly go out and, go to festivals or try different restaurants across the city. And so it certainly does take effort to kind of find a community in your group.
I'm curious, talking about Berlin, I'm going to go to Jacob. One of the questions we had, which will also bring me to my question on crypto. What are your thoughts on investing in foreign currency instead of bond market? Should we consider investing in, and this is, I guess, a follow-up to that, should we consider investing in long-term care insurance? But let's talk about the foreign currency instead of the bond market.
Yeah. So I know a lot has changed here in our country recently, but we still are the reserve currency. We still are the country financially that has the most resources. I still very much believe the safest place for people to store their capital for the future would be in U.S. government bonds. U.S. has never defaulted on a bond. Treasury bills, 1 to 3 month treasury bills in a risk management world, we consider that a risk-free rate of return. You get a rate of return with relatively no risk because the US government has not defaulted. Now, when you're talking about foreign currencies, there are a lot of countries that will peg their currency to the dollar to create stability. And then there are other currencies that will float based on their overall economic situation. But you got to deal with their overall political system, what type of potential corruption could be. Maybe there's not as much transparency in the data. So just because the environment today seems a little bit more volatile, it doesn't mean that, okay, let's go overseas and instead of having our money in dollars, let's have it in, the yuan. I don't feel that foreign currency is a good place to store capital. I still feel that the dollar is the most stable.
What about crypto? We all hear about crypto. I don't understand crypto at all.
So I would say crypto from a technological standpoint, phenomenal. It's a wonderful accounting system.
Can you build wealth with crypto?
I don't feel you do. I'll say this. So the American dream has always pushed this country further than other countries. And people want to come to the United States for the American dream, that you can make it here. But a lot of people have found or feel that life has passed them by. And maybe they are not going to be that millionaire that they once thought. And I feel like people play the lottery, people buy Bitcoin because they want a little piece of that American dream. Someone might say, well, I'm not going to be able to save my way to wealth, but if I buy into people saying that a Bitcoin is going to be worth 200,000 a coin in a few years, if I buy one, then maybe that will move the needle for me. To me, that's more gambling. That's more gambling than anything else. And there is a fine line between investing and gambling. But I feel that crypto is still a theory and a project that is still being played out. I feel that there is a lot of there's a lot of shenanigans that takes place with crypto. And I don't look at it as a solid investment. I look at it as like rolling the dice or buying a lottery ticket. But the technology is going to be around. I just have a difficult time putting a monetary value on a coin that represents that technology. So I have never put my own money in crypto. I have never invested a client's money in crypto. There are plenty of investments out there that I can really assess the risk reward. With crypto, it's gambling.
Wasn't there like a new ETF that came out that was a crypto ETF that seemed a little bit more safer?
Yeah, I mean,
Is that a thing?
There are ETFs where you can buy crypto, you can buy digital assets, and maybe in that realm you could be a little bit more diversified in that space. I just don't think that's a space where you want to put your safe capital. If there's money that you say, if I lose it, fine, okay, that's fine. But don't put money in crypto that you are anticipating needing for retirement. That's just too much risk. There's already a lot of risk out there. You don't want to, have risk on steroids. And sometimes that's what people do is they throw caution at the wind and they don't realize how risky that type of instrument really is.
This is more of a lighthearted question for the audience that we were given. So I'd love to get your take on this. Is the rapid changing technology, remember we bridge two worlds, making work more difficult, or do you find yourself adapting and using the tools to your advantage? And I'm guessing this could be social media. This could be just tools that we use in our day-to-day work. I'll start with Jacob. Do you want to kick off?
Sure. I would say the world is more complicated because of this technology. You can theoretically do a lot more in a shorter period of time. The Harvard Business Review did an article that talked about companies that were embracing AI. And are those companies more productive using AI or are they less productive? And the article actually found that in many cases, people are less productive because they rely heavily on AI and therefore they don't feel like they need to do as much heavy lifting as they once did. But those companies that use AI as a rough draft or kind of brainstorming, but it's a starting point, then those companies' productivity has increased exponentially. So it's how you use the tool. I use AI at ASU as a rough draft. I use AI in the business world as a rough draft. That's it. You cannot rely on AI to be the end all. You need it to just frame something out and then you can debunk it or you can add to it, you can reframe it, but it's just a starting point. But technology, for me, I remember 24 years ago when I became a financial planner, how we had to do everything manual. If a client came in and wanted a review, we would call the companies, get the values, create a spreadsheet, show them. Now, within 3 seconds, I can do a full report on 10,000 holdings and show back testing, and it's just phenomenal the amount of resources that are there, but you do have to conceptually understand it. And that's what I tried to teach at ASU is it's no longer memorizing. It's understanding the concept. If you can conceptually understand where that's going, then you can use it to your advantage. But if you have no baseline for it and you can't fact check it, if you were to use it, you are blindly using it and it could really come back to hurt you. So you have to use it with caution, but with the right approach, our productivity has increased.
AI is an interesting one. I still feel a little funny about it.
Well, especially working in the entertainment industry.
Yeah.
KJZZ is the entertainment industry. Working in the entertainment industry, there are many
Media
tools.
land.
The
We're
media. There are many tools that can take your voice and make them say anything that they want to.
Yeah.
And I think that, working in the theater, and my background is in film and television, AI has really pushed the boundaries of a lot of things. Most movies that you see have some element of AI included in it. Just so you know, like someone's not looking the right way, they can make the person look the correct way. Most films that you see are using some sort of technology like that. But there is a slippery slope to it that, like, you know, what happens when your lead actress isn't available for a reshoot and you really need to get the film out? Well, maybe you can make her say something that she didn't say originally, but she should get paid for that, shouldn't she? There's so many copyright issues with AI that really haven't been figured out yet. A lot of the things that went into AI in order to make it work, no one went to the authors of the books and the painters. And, you know, I can type in, like, do a painting in the style of Van Gogh. Well, I mean, Van Gogh, obviously, but like, or someone more recent. But no one, but if I wanted to generate that image, well, that image is in another artist's image. And so that artist should be given credit for it. There's a lot of copyright issues.
Messy.
It's super messy. But you know, I do the same thing. If I'm going to write a business letter, chances are my very first draft of that business letter is going to be from AI, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to change all the sentences. But the very first thing is the very first draft of it is a lot of times done through AI.
How about you, Frank?
I mean, where AI comes into place, I mean, being a professor, you know, we always have to have on our syllabus, like, what are the ways that you can use AI in the class for the students? So whether it's for, as an initial jump starter idea, or for editing, or not at all. I know for my own research, like, I'm old school. I don't know. I just like starting out with my paper and pencil and writing out my ideas, because it forces you to like think and like kind of just sit with the ideas and move forward with them. Whereas, you know, AI is good in terms of, it can generate these ideas, but it's almost kind of like you're offloading a part of your brain or your kind of critical thinking area into this if you use it over excessively. I don't know. I mean, for me, it's technology is good though. I mean, yeah, we sometimes have our calendar and write down all the dates, but yeah, everything's in our phone. So it's like good in some regards, but in other, just using it wisely, I guess.
Sometimes I miss the days where you only had like 5 channels and that was it. That's it.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Right.
This could also go to everyone, though. The listener wanted to get your take, Frank. But I think everyone will have a thought on this. Although Frank, full disclosure, Frank's a millennial, so
I turned 40 last month. Okay, so just there. I've entered midlife.
You were a little young.
That's how we are, Frank. That's you know how Gen Xers roll.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, this listener said perhaps it's too early to tell, but do you see a shift in Gen X's vision of the future for our children and ourselves?
Oh God,
That's a
said
hard
that they
question.
would save more, and so I think it is tough even for me. You know, I study midlife and old age, and I'm just like, I'm putting this away for retirement, and I'm like, it's just there, you know, with other expenses piling up with young kids, and so it's a tough, I think, mentally very challenging to just think about, oh wow, what will I be like in 20 or 30 years or 40 years? Who knows? And who knows what, health needs you may have, whether you'll, have various illnesses or have a cancer diagnosis, whatever. You can't predict that far in advance, but it's still obviously something, at least within this country, because most employers don't have pensions anymore. There's an increase in kind of you're having to
think a lot
contribute.
about it. Yeah. Well, I love this conversation, but I also want to open it up to you guys. And we have our microphone there with Chad Snow. So I know you guys have questions. And there we go.
I heard about a functional imaging, brain imaging study that humans can like light up the like empathy centers of their brain when they imagine themselves older, as opposed to like thinking about animals, like they're like activating the empathy, but like their own selves, imagine
Right.
older, there's no like,
Right.
you know. And so I'm thinking about like, is that our human civilization, like we've never lived this long, like there's no framework in our brains to like us to go there, and so
Right.
we have to like self-impose this like you're gonna get old, like
Right.
get your shit together.
No, that's a
You a
good.
Gen Xer? You're a Gen Xer.
No, that's a great point. I haven't heard of that study, but another study I saw or I read about where, right, they had to kind of imagine like a friend and then imagine, or when they imagine, right, themselves in the future, right, the part of the brain or area that kind of was associated with strangers or someone that you didn't know about kind of lit up. So, right, it is kind of a foreign concept to think, oh my gosh, like, right, because from 1900 till now, our life expectancy went up 30 years, which is phenomenal and great in a sense because we are living longer, but it comes with different attitudes and thinking about how we structure our lives differently.
Well, and also like, you know, the Golden Girls were 50 and 52 when
Isn't
they
that
were
wild?
Yeah, and so so when I said like no, I still am 30, I mean, I feel like I'm a kid. It's hard for me to be like, no, you can't, you know, work 12 hours 4 days in a row anymore. You know, you just can't do what you used to be able to do when you were younger. It's hard for me to process that. So when you like, I don't even think about I don't think about aging. I don't think about getting older because I really do I still am like, well, that's for old people, like when you're 50, which I am. But like it's hard for me to be like, oh wait, no, I am that person. So, you know, and I don't look like Blanche. Like
I love Blanche.
Dorothy. I love Blanche. I'm
I-
more of a Dorothy.
I will tell you, I had a moment last year. I was 47 and I was having dinner with a friend. And they were telling me about their partner, and they're like, their partner's 37. And immediately I was like, oh, we're the same age. And,
Yeah.
But it's like, no,
Yeah.
not at all. But yeah, I feel the same way.
Yeah.
And I would say too, I mean, it is true. Talking to my kids at ASU, talking about retirement, it's just a foreign concept. So you have to just frame it differently. Maybe they can't think about retirement, but they understand financially independent. So if you can say, do you want someday, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, do you want to have enough money that you don't have to work? They would say yes.
Yes.
And then it's like, okay, let's then reverse engineer it and figure out what that looks like for you. So it's all about framing and getting people interested. And I do say, I do feel that this younger generation, they want that. They want that financial independence. They just have no clue on how to get there. And I would say it's a lot harder today than it has been in prior decades to be able to get ahead financially. But it's all how you frame it. And I think the thought of just being financially independent, it appeals to everybody.
Jacob, I'm curious because you have older children, and there are some people that might be empty nesters, or might be some Gen Xers. I have an 11-year-old. How did you talk to your kids? How did you teach your children? So you have 21 all the way down to 14. How did you, because I never learned this in school. I don't think many of us learned how to be financially savvy in school. We sort of figured it out. And then we realized, oh dear, what lessons did you teach to your kids that you could share for folks here that might have some 20-some-year-olds, perhaps an 11-year-old, or even grandkids? How do you start teaching these lessons?
Yeah, I was fortunate. I'm actually a third generation financial planner.
Oh, that's not
so
fair.
my father was, my grandfather was. So at the kitchen table, we were constantly talking about investing and thinking about your future self. So I would say I'm to a fault thinking about my future self. I'm trying really hard to be present because I'm always thinking about in the future, whether it's for the kids or for the business or for myself. And that was something that was embedded into me, always looking long term. But it is really trying to just break down the most basic principles. And I feel it begins with budgeting. Nobody likes budgeting. And I once heard something on a TV show where someone said, you've got to be good at two things. Either you got to be really good and know exactly how to do balance sheets and profit and loss statements and budgets and know exactly where every dollar is going, or you need to make so much money you don't even have to worry about that. Very few people are on that latter one. And so we really, if we want to get ahead, if it's meant to be, it's up to me. I've got to find a way to get ahead financially, live below your means. And I think that that's really important, because you always hear people talk about living beyond their means. And we know that that's bad, because if you live beyond your means, you're spending more than you're making. So you're taking on debt. Bad. We don't want to do that. But even living within your means isn't necessarily great, because that's living paycheck to paycheck. If you're making $3,000, you're spending $3,000, you've got nothing for the future. You have to live below your income. Whether you make 30,000 or 30 million, you've got to live below your income so you have something to save for the future. So I think talking to the younger generation, getting them invested in, buying a bike, saving up for the bike, having a job, earning some money, and really understanding that money is a tool. If you teach your kids that money is a tool, they won't look at money as the end all and that they just want to have money. They'll understand that money will help them get to where they want to be, and money will give them a more secure life for themselves and for their family. So I think it really begins with budgeting and understanding the concept of living below your means.
Are there any other questions out there?
I just wanted to say a comment to your comment, feeling like you're 30. Hi. So yeah, we always tend to feel a lot younger than we really are. And I, at 52, my mother got to the point where she needed full-time care. So she moved in with me. And it was at that time, 4 years into it, that I realized, wow, I'm getting old.
Yeah.
My mother's at this point, and my mother, I thought, would never need full-time care. But sure enough, 4 years later, she passed, and it's kind of a wake-up call. Like, I'm 57. I'm not 27, although I feel like I'm 20 sometimes, and I act like I'm 12. Yeah. So to your point, I think it's really hard to imagine the future when we feel like we're 10, 20 years younger than our age. Just like to say that.
I totally feel that. I think it's really humbling when I'm at the stage where friends are losing parents. I lost my mother more than a decade ago, but my dad's still here. And it's really weird. It's just it's a very strange mindset to see your friends physically changing before your eyes, and seeing these people that that would buy you Dr. Pepper and let you hang out at their house during the summers pass away. And I'm so sorry about your mother. That's really difficult. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. But I'm wondering if you guys can expound on that, like this idea of we just, how we're seeing the world now. I mean, as Gen Xers, and I almost want to posit this as, how do you talk to your own kids about the future? Because as Gen Xers, we're kind of like, but we really can't leave that idea with them, right? We want them to be hopeful and optimistic, even though we're sort of like, oh my gosh.
I think they are, though. Like, I think this next generation and these next generations coming up, I think they are hopeful and optimistic. Truthfully,
Savvy too. I mean,
they're super savvy.
Confident. There's a confidence.
Yeah, and they know what's going on. And I know that there's a lot of this like social media insanity.
Oh, talk more about that, Leanne. Because you see a lot of it with your work, because your kids, I mean, they're branding themselves.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing about when you work with children, and like I said, the children in our shows start usually around 8. We do classes for 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds. We have a daughter who's a swimmer, and we've been talking, should she have her own Instagram? She's 14 years old and she's a swimmer. Like, no one wants their 14-year-old daughter in a bathing suit on the internet. Like, that's the very first thing. Then am I the one that's doing all of her internet? Is my husband the one who's doing all of her, all of her posting? So there's this social media has really come into play, and it's really caused a disservice. And I'm actually really curious if there's any research on this, because I think what social media has done is that it has taken away a defense mechanism that humans have, this whole idea of the impermanence of memory. So like when we were in high school, wouldn't you be mortified
Oh God.
if some of the things that you like thought was so important at the time, like you were reminded of that every year that you posted that? I would be mortified. These kids can't escape their most cringeworthy moments. And like,
And well, and reminding them that everything lives on the internet,
And-
even if when you delete it.
yes, and it's everything all of a sudden, everything is the most important. And that means everything is nothing is important, right? If everything's the most important, nothing is important. And they keep getting reminded of these cringeworthy moments. Whereas like when we were young people, we can forget. Like we have the impermanence of memory.
You could also rip up the photo, Leanne.
Well, I did, and we did. We cut the people out of the photos that we didn't want to remember. And and now that we're 50, we can be like, oh, that was so and so, but we can't remember that person's name anymore because it's not important to us, because our memory lets us forget it. These kids can't forget anything. They are continuously reminded of it. And I think that's a big problem with social media. And so one of the things that we do, obviously, at Valley Youth Theater is like, you guys, we do let them post on social media, obviously, because that's the way that people find out about things too.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well, it's their career as well.
it's
for
their
some of them.
career as well, but also there's a time and a place for it. And when you're working, that is not on a stage. You're not in your class on your phone. You're not on stage on your phone. You can talk about it, but we go through a whole thing about like what you can and can't do on the internet. You don't say where you are going to be. You only say where you were. And there's a whole generation of kids that are growing up with these rules. But I do think they're very optimistic. I think these kids are really savvy and really optimistic, maybe more than Gen X, maybe more so than Gen X, where we're just like, whatever, we'll do it. Okay.
I think they're more confident than we were. I mean, I see
Yeah.
my daughter and her friends, and there's a level of confidence that I don't recall ever having. But Frank, I'd love your thoughts on social media and just what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to like, how are you utilizing it? So are you just doomsday scrolling, seeing what everyone's doing on Facebook, Instagram, or, I mean, that's as far as I go, but obviously there's TikTok and Snapchat, and I don't know, I'm probably missing some. So I think how you're utilizing it, is it for, right, just seeing social comparison. So, oh, so-and-so is out, has their vacation, or is doing this, and then you kind of like, oh wow, I wish I was doing that, or why didn't they invite me, if they're out with their friends and whatnot. But if you're using it as a tool to engage with others and engage within your community, then I can certainly see it as a positive. And so I think it's just, how do you think, social media can best be utilized for your own needs? Yeah.
I think one of the things I'd be curious to get your thoughts, because sometimes I'll find things and it's like, if you do invest this,
Right.
I would say
probably not listen to it, right?
15% of my class is debunking things that they saw on TikTok. And there's a lot of people, I mean, anybody can say anything on social media, and people believe what they want to believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if they hear that there's this investment that they could double their money in a week and there's no risk, they believe it. And then they come to class and be like, hey, tell me about this. And I'm like, what specifically do you want to know about it? Well, how can I do it? I'm like, no, that's not how it works. And so it is a lot of debunking. And unfortunately, that's where they get their information. I mean, all three of my kids, social media, they know what's going on because they see the feeds, and because they haven't been in the real world like we have, they're a little bit naive to people's tactics of manipulation, of sales. And so you just have to be really careful. And I will always say, don't believe everything you read. Don't believe everything that you watch. Don't believe everything that you see. And what you need to do is question, ask questions, research it. Don't take someone else's opinion as your own. Don't be intellectually lazy. Find out what you believe in, find the research, and then go with that. And so I'm constantly telling my students, don't be intellectually lazy. Do your own research, form your own opinions. And when they hear that, they do know. They're like, yeah, I probably should. Now, whether they do it or not, I don't know, but they do recognize it. And I think that is a good first step, that they recognize that that is the more appropriate way to go about it.
One of the questions I had, because on that topic, I've been convincing my kids to go with an investment firm, like early. I'm tricking them into it. I'm saying, I wish I did it. Look how bad I'm off now. If you do it early, this is what helps, right? Trick them into it. They bought it. Great. They went with an investment, firm, an advisor, broker, whatever you call it. Is that advised because you're still doing it intelligently, or are you losing too much money? Because I realized pretty early on, because I wasn't worried about it for so long, I don't know anything about anything.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really good question. See how I should start answering that. I would say overall, will you reframe that one? I was listening to it and then I got a little distracted with the microphone and I kind of forgot.
Yeah, sure. Sorry. Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. So the question was, I tricked my kids into getting into with an investment with a broker. They're doing Northwest Mutual, whatever. So they're doing that because I realized I had no idea what I was doing. Gen X, full on, didn't care about it. Thought I'd be dead by then. Whatever, right? That attitude. So I convinced them to do that. Is there a downside to that? Because you're speaking about making sure you educated yourself.
Yeah, I tell my students that when you have more time than money, you should do the research on your own. And then when you get to the point where you have more money than time, that's when you outsource it. And here's the reason why. Is if you don't have much to invest, then perhaps the top firms, those firms that are fiduciaries that put your interests first, they're probably not working with the $2,000 account or the $5,000 account. You might, and I'm not generalizing, there are phenomenal advisors that will work with people just starting out, but you do have that potential of smaller dollar amounts with people that maybe don't know a lot about investing. They could potentially be taken advantage of. They could be paying higher fees than they should. And they could be investing with someone that is perhaps more transactional based instead of long-term, as you make money, we make money. So that's why I tell my students, because a lot of the students will quickly say, I need to hire a financial planner. I'm like, no, you don't. You don't have enough money to do that just yet. You need to research, find out what you should be investing in, and then do it yourself and take the licks and learn from that. And then once you've amassed enough, then you can go to someone that's really qualified, that is in the public eye or is at least on the internet, and you can research them, see their philosophy. And then just like going to the majors, you basically go to the majors and you hire someone to take it from there. You're delegating it. But if you're delegating it from day one, you don't really know what they're doing. Are they in your best interest? Are they making you money? Are they taking advantage of you? You just don't know what you don't know. And when we don't know, we have a tendency to fear. So if you're investing and it's a bit fearful and this environment is such, you might be your own worst enemy and be shooting yourself in the foot by investing in the wrong things with the wrong person. Therefore, if you just did your own research and started small, I think you would get a whole lot more out of it.
Do we have another question?
Since we were kind of on that topic of kids and how you're teaching them certain things, my wife and I have two daughters. One's a senior this year, the other one's a junior, and one has great street smarts. I always had good street smarts. She could look at stuff, and the other one, I want to tell her, come on, Haley, open your eyes and look at this situation. How do you get the one to think like the other? I guess
You don't.
They might be
I
wired.
mean, that's the thing is like, I'm in the same boat. I have a 14-year-old daughter who is so focused on her studies in school. She knows what she wants. She is very goal oriented. And I have probably the nicest, sweetest, most lovable 9-year-old boy anyone has ever met in their entire lives. And maybe school is just not his strong point, you know? But what I will tell you is that my sweet, nice 9-year-old boy, like, I'm going to go with that because he's a good, lovely, wonderful little guy. And that's his thing. So I'm going to help him. I'm going to nurture that for him. And it's not going to make him the best student in the world. Hopefully he gets out of 3rd grade. We'll see. But it is going to foster that kindness and love and wonderfulness in him. And yes, there are things that he's going to come up against that are going to try to knock that wonderfulness down. But as a parent, my husband and I are together, we're going to try to make him resilient. And then we're also going to foster that positive part in my daughter as well and make that part. I don't think you focus on the things that they're not. I think you focus on the things that are and make those stronger. And those things will kind of overshadow the maybe not so street smart, maybe not so street smart of it all. Like, there is something to find in each kid. You just have to find it. Sometimes it's difficult. But they will be okay because you're worrying about it. And as a parent, if you're worrying about it, you're doing it right. Because if you were doing it wrong, you wouldn't worry anyway about it, right?
I think we have time for one more question. Be brave. Come on. There's no wrong question. You'll wrap it up for us, sir. Thank you.
No problem. So previously, I think we mentioned, we're the sandwich generation, and my family and friend cohort, we have parents that are having to have memory issues. And I'm just wondering, with your research on memory issues in our cohort as well as older in the US, are we seeing more of that? And then I don't know if anybody wants to comment on how we as Gen X how we can deal with that.
I mean, I think, what's this stat? By 2030, there'll be more people 65 and older than
18.
Under age 18. So I think it's focusing on the positive thing is, if you have a family and a cohort and friends who are kind of going through this similarly, you kind of have your community that you can kind of bounce ideas off and think through these issues together in terms of what is or may not be best for your family members. So I would kind of rely on that, and kind of, so you have your support system, and then kind of building off of that and other ways to be resilient.
I will say, can I just
comment
really quick on this? Like, again, not a psychologist, not a medical doctor in any way. However, I've actually read a lot about this. And one of the biggest things that is in this new research of memory care is a basic theater kind of aspect, which is called yes and, which is what you use in improv. So a lot of times people who are losing their memory, they'll be walking outside, they'll be, where you're going, and they're like, I'm going to the store. And instead of saying, no, you're not going to the store, you're coming back inside with me, just stop this right now, come back inside, you yes and, which is a theater game. You say, oh, you're going to the store? I'd love to go to the store with you. I need to get my jacket though, because I think it's gonna rain. Do you need a jacket? You do. Let's go get our jackets. And by the time you're back inside, they kind of forget about it. Things that I learned as a young person in theater are things that they are finding are helping people with memory issues and helping the people who have to deal with the people with memory issues. So it's like, I don't want to go outside today. It's too full of purple pigs in the garden. Be like, those purple pigs, man, I tried to get rid of them, and like, they just keep coming back. Let's sit down and think of all the things we can do to get rid of them again. Like, you play, like, not playing along, but playing along.
Step in their world.
Yeah, like step in their world and like be there in that memory loss with them, be there with them, and just, because the fighting is gonna
Don't fight.
it's just gonna wear you down. But if you yes and them, like the world will open up to both of you, and you'll probably have a much better relationship there.
I think it will make the journey a little bit easier. But yes, the numbers are going up. I think the Alzheimer's Association, their latest report, 7.2 million Americans. I mean, countless hours of unpaid care by family members like yourself. Yeah. And so it's really finding a way. I love that.
The yes
and.
Computer games.
Because it's very frustrating. It can be very frustrating when you see your parent changing. It's heartbreaking. There's grief and there's frustration. So yeah, I love that. I think that's really beautiful. Well, that is all the time we have. And I am so grateful for everyone who came out this evening. And of course, I'm grateful for you guys. You had such wonderful responses. Can we give them a huge round of applause? You guys are amazing. Thank you so much. And of course, I believe this will, if you want to revisit it, Chad, this will be on KJZZ.org so people can rewatch it or you can share it. Chad is our news director at KJZZ. Oh dear. And we appreciate your support of KJZZ and public media. And just thank you guys for coming out this evening. And yeah, thank you so much. Thank you guys.
Yeah.